Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of the My Generation podcast. Thank you all so much for listening to the past few weeks of episodes. They've all been so much fun to record. We've had some amazing stuff and we've got some great stuff coming up again next week. Really excited to bring you so much new stuff. This week we are talking about football. Now, I know this is a topic that with a lot of other guests that I've had on the show haven't been too interested in, so I'm going solo for a football episode. Although if there is a My Generation podcast listener out there who is interested in football and talking to me about it, then do contact the page, as I would love to revisit this topic with a guest as well. But don't worry, even though it's just me and you talking today here, I have got some comments and some features that I'd like to talk about, as well as just going through some of my own personal stories about why I personally love football. A lot of people, their football love or sporting love in general comes at a very, very young age, sort of 5-10 years old. Get involved in it through primary school, very early education. PE becomes quite a big thing, connecting through sport. But it wasn't something I enjoyed as a kid. I didn't enjoy football at all up until about the age of 12. I had no interest in it whatsoever. And there was one turning point really for me that changed me as a person. That turning point was the 2010 World Cup when, and this does show my age, when South Africa hosted the tournament. And that was really my start point for my love of football because of the grandeur of the event. It was so talked about. I was going to a new school right as in the transition of when the World Cup was happening, going from one school to the other over that period of summer. And when we would have open days at the school, I do remember distinctly that I was able to connect and talk to people because of the World Cup. It was something that everyone was talking about. And first time being hosted in Africa, the vuvuzelas still ringing loud in my ears. There's such a strong sense of such a big event. It was so different, that World Cup for me. There was even about the ball that was being used. I remember that it was a different football. There was something about it that made it travel faster, I think, if I remember rightly. So shots were flying in left, right and centre. There was so many outstanding goals. Off the top of my head, I can remember Giovanni van Bronckhorst's 30-yard screamer from the left-back position, a cross goal against Muslera of Uruguay when they went through to the final. Diego Forlan was the top scorer that year in the tournament, and it was just such an amazing summer, a very transitional time for me that stuck out as such a vivid thing for me. And that was the reason I got involved in sport. I started to see more of what was going on, the competition, the narrative of it, and that love just expanded and grew from there. At the moment, I attend a theatre writing group with the Marlow, and we recently did a project that sparked my interest in revisiting the idea of talking about football, because our writing teacher, what he taught us about was that football is like a narrative story, and it's part of the reason we love it. It has underdogs, it has an act structure with the first half and the second half, it has drama, ups and downs, transfers, rumours, people moving, real life drama, on the pitch drama, fights, red cards, late goals, big drama. And when I was thinking about it from that perspective, I realised just why we love football, because it's a real, living, breathing narrative story that's chopping and changing. And obviously there is quite a lot of complexity to the world of football. I'm trying to stay on the positive side of it for today's discussion. And I've just always enjoyed that underdog story. I don't know about you, because I remember when I was a teenager in school again, I was watching the African Cup of Nations one year, and it was a year that Burkina Faso really performed to a very high standard. I think it was about 2013. I hadn't really watched much of the African Cup of Nations before, and my way in was seeing that there was this rising up-and-coming team that were playing well. I remember they had, I believe it was Berntse, a striker that was playing in Germany, just absolutely tearing it up at the African Cup of Nations. And it was just such a beautiful thing to see. So a nation that traditionally hasn't performed into a super high standard, coming up and showing their worth. I don't even think they won it that year, but I've watched the African Cup of Nations pretty much every year since then. And actually this year, 2019, has been a very, very strong one. I'm recording this in the middle of July, so by the time you've seen this, the final would have been played, but I've just come off the back of seeing the Senegal versus Tunisia semi-final, which has been very, very strong to watch. There's been so many incredible games. The same with the Gold Cup over in America, quite obscure tournaments, as well as the large coverage that the Women's World Cup got. But another reason that really sort of boosted my love of the sport and seeing that come through with others was just the passion of the fans. I remember watching these sports and seeing such a strong group. My work is in radio, and I've done a lot of work on a sports show and working with local Kent-based sport clubs and seeing what the supporters have to say about their club, checking their social medias, seeing that there's so much coverage of local Kent sport and that there's such a living community here. And it's not just unique to Kent. I know that because I've seen it in other places. You watch all these big matches happening, and even the little ones get such an attendance. Ebbsfleet United get a few thousand. Even small teams, like I know there's like Margate, Herne Bay, Canterbury FC, tiny clubs, but have really passionate small fan groups. And that's because people have a love of seeing their local team pushing up. And the drama of it, not winning one week, winning the next, pushing for a league, fighting a relegation. And there's just something about how intense all that is. It just makes you feel so many emotions. I think one of my favourite sporting tournaments of all time was last year's World Cup finals. It was just such an intense show, and England were progressing so far, and the summer, the beautiful weather. I was out, and I just coincidentally I was on a family holiday at the time that the group stages were out, which was a complete fluke because none of my family watch any football, but it meant that I got to watch pretty much all of the group games as they were happening, and then tried to time the rest of my holiday around England games as we slowly progressed through. But it was such an enthralling tournament. It brought people together. I saw people and friends more frequently than I would have seen them otherwise. We got talking about previous tournaments, success. I watched the Colombia round of 16 match with my family, and my mum has no care about football whatsoever. But when we were sat together watching that match, just the intensity of what was happening, it was incredible. We absolutely loved it. It brought me and my mum so close that game. And it was such a surprise because I wasn't expecting to see her get so into it. When we scored, it was incredible. When I think the moment that gave me the biggest shock of the whole thing was when Colombia midfielder Uribe, he had a 30-yard pot shot out of nothing in like the 89th minute, which Jordan Pickford, who's quite a short goalkeeper that England have, managed to just tip it onto the crossbar. That was incredible. And then seeing Yerry Mina score in the last couple of seconds to take it to extra time and to penalties. All of that in drama and intensity, it just generated so many emotions. It was like I was in the cinema. I get the same feeling when I'm watching a movie, but I felt more involved because it was England. I got the same sort of feeling from a personal note because I'm half Welsh. So when Euro 2016 rolled round, it was great for me, not so great from an England perspective because they were knocked out by Iceland very, very early on in the tournaments, and as England fans, you won't want to revisit that one too much. But from a Welsh perspective, made it to the semi-finals. Hal Robson-Kanu scored an absolutely beautiful goal. And for me, that was, again, a massive, massive thing. And there's a certain national pride to it. But then obviously supporting underdog teams and teams that are just playing beautiful, beautiful football. Like traditionally, my favourite league to watch in the whole entire world is the Championship, the English second tier, because you're pushing to try and get into the Premier League, which will give you such a big financial boost and as well as a exposure level. Like Bournemouth were a tiny club until they got promoted to the Premier League, and despite the fact they still have quite a small stadium, they're a big club now. So the teams competing in the Championship were absolutely incredible to watch last season. I'm an Ipswich Town fan personally. Not that I try to stay quite unbiased in terms of football because I just like to watch beautiful, beautiful football above anything else. And so as an Ipswich fan, it was quite frustrating last season seeing us to fall so far down. But I actually think Paul Lambert's doing quite a good job so far in terms of boosting the squad, and we just need to get behind him as a set of Ipswich Town fans. But And I know it pains me to say it, but I just loved watching Norwich City, our local rivals, play last season. Their football was absolutely scintillating. They played everyone off the park. The beautiful play between Timu Puki, Stiepermann, and I think it was Vrankic as well, was just incredible. The way they zipped the ball around, 1-2s runs, blending inside, having two really young, inciting fullbacks. They had Max Aarons on the right and Lewis on the left. Just absolute stunning players. Kamaru for Leeds as well, just dominating. And Leeds United, who also got promoted. Leeds, not Leeds, Sheffield United. Sad for Leeds fans and commiserations who didn't go up. But Sheffield United, they traditionally not as talented a group of players in terms of actual technical ability, but the effort that they were putting in to get promoted. Billy Sharp is one of my favourite players, their striker, because his passion, he tragically lost a son. Right after he lost his son, that very weekend he was back on the pitch playing, and I'll try and insert a clip here.
There were incredible scenes in England last night when a footballer marked a terrific goal with a heart-rending tribute to his late son. Doncaster's Billy Sharp was playing against Middlesbrough just 3 days after his little baby boy passed away. Louis Sharp was only 2 days old, and his father revealed that goal was for him. The message on his shirt read, "That's for you, son." And he revealed later on Twitter that he wanted to do something special for his boy. A wonderful tribute, and incredibly credit to the referee for not booking him as he could so easily have done. A tragic tale, but a reminder that football is the beautiful game.
What a touching moment that was, because he was able to use his job as a way to come back from such a place, and was so passionate about it, and opened up to the world saying that goal was for you, son. That was a beautiful moment from Billy Sharp, one of my favourite footballers, because he's not blessed with bags of technical ability, but he's such a workhorse, and he always makes sure he's in the right place. It's like Thomas Muller for Bayern Munich on the highest level. He isn't fast, he isn't strong, he isn't prolific. He's just always in the right place at the right time. Those two are two of the smartest mental footballers, along with probably Lionel Messi as well, just in terms of having a great footballing brain. They're just uncomparable. And another super touching story I just wanted to touch on was one with Jermaine Defoe. There was a child called Bradley Lowery who was having a battle with cancer, which tragically he lost, and he was only a child. But footballer Jermaine Defoe really stood by him and gave him an outlet. He brought him onto the pitch. He scored a goal. I think he won a Goal of the Month award, Bradley. He came on the pitch. He was happy when he was there. And Jermaine Defoe, who's one of the most respected English forwards in my opinion, just gave him such an amazing life, even though it's so tragic that his life was cut so short. But it was a moment like that made me think that football really, really is a passionate place, and that there are some really great people out there who are making a difference. And they gave him such a happy time on the pitch. It just looked like such a great thing to be doing. In the 6th episode of our podcast, we talked to Connor, and he said that someone with disabilities is joining the Rock Climbing Society, and that's incredible. I just love the idea that it gives people outlets who don't often feel like they have an outlet, and that inclusiveness that football has across the world is incredible, and that even if I wasn't able to play, that there were ways I could get involved. Another story I wanted to touch on was Real Oviedo, which is a club in Spain which went into administration and eventually dropped down through the divisions, I think eventually to the 5th tier of Spanish football. It was quite a sad story because they were a titan of the Spanish game. They were up 1st, 2nd division almost all the time, and then just completely lost it financially. But they changed their club. They became a club that became the fans. So you donated. If you donated money, you became a shareholder in the club immediately. And through fan money and a handful of professionals, I think Santi Cazorla, or it was definitely Michu, if you remember Michu from his Swansea days. If you remember Michu, definitely leave a comment, because he was remember how good he was for that one season at Swansea. But anyway, invested money and got the club back up to where they should have been, where the size of the club was. They gave the fans what they wanted. And because it was all self-made. Again, stories like that completely lovely. It brings a community together. People across the world were donating to Real Oviedo and becoming fans across the seas. It connects you. I know that I didn't really have much of a care for Australian football, but me and a friend from school, we used to, on the video game FIFA, we would set up a career mode each, and we would both play as Australian teams. Don't ask why, because I don't have the answer. And we would basically build a career mode through those Australian teams, making them really good, playing against Australian sides. And I got to learn about Australian football just through playing with a friend on FIFA. And it was quite interesting. It's just, I didn't expect that. And I just briefly wanted to paint a picture off of, there's this article, I'm going to refer to it below. It's on the website Sportskeeda. And just a brief quote here from about why the author of this particular story loves football and the beautiful game, and says, "Football as a sport alone is beautiful. It is like a blank canvas waiting to be filled by the players on the field. It is a stunning spectacle where we see elegance, athleticism, coupled with skills and intelligence, all for the simple goal of putting the ball in the net." And I think that's a lovely way of saying it, that blank canvas that you're painting on as you're playing football. The cutting runs, diving, going between people, that's the bit that I enjoy. It's difficult to picture, and if you're not a football fan, I can fully understand, because it's I'm just trying to hopefully here paint a picture of the complexity of football that can maybe be unnoticed by someone who's not as much of a fan of it. I have that same feeling with other sports. So I have, and I'm going to refer to them when we get to the comments, I have some friends who are very interested in Formula One, but it doesn't click for me. And to them, they see the cars, they see the engines, they see the driving, the margins, the tiny microseconds of each individual decision, and it means so much to them. That's the thing. I'm here really in this episode trying to show you why I love football. Another thing I used to do quite a lot growing up actually was to broaden my knowledge of football, and this is something I did as just a hobby. I used to go onto Wikipedia, find footballers or football clubs, click on a player, see what clubs that player played for, read a bit about him, click on his club, then find another player from that club, and roll. And I could spend hours sat on Wikipedia pinging between articles about footballers and learning so much about them. It's why the sort of late 2000s or the late noughties, early 10s is my peakest knowledge about football, because it's the period I've got the most research about, because I just spent so much time building an absolute data bank of football knowledge, and I don't even know why I did it. It was just so much fun seeing the stories, seeing where people came from, because some footballers obviously came from not massive clubs, they just became. There's a footballer called Ian Wright, who I just listened to an amazing podcast about by the True Geordie. He got to interview Ian Wright, one of my favourite podcasts. So, I mean, that's the dream, is to have a podcast like his. And Ian Wright went on to talk about his journey, because Ian Wright was a street footballer who eventually went on to play for Crystal Palace and Arsenal. Just that connection with a street level of football and going to the top. He had an amazing friend who was also a brilliant footballer called Rocastle, who sadly passed away. And hearing him talk about that, a close friend, someone he played football with, it's heartbreaking. But Ian Wright makes it inspirational because he's such an incredible man. And hearing his words was amazing. Definitely putting that at the top of the description. He's such an amazing man and knows exactly what he's talking about when it comes to football players, and just a joy to listen to. Next, I'm just going to go over a few comments. I'm going to keep this section quite short because we got some more or less just funny comments this week about this particular subject. So when I asked my friends on Facebook, why do you enjoy watching football? George said, I don't, except the World Cup, but that's more of a national pride thing. So that's quite interesting how it connects you nationally. I know it's something that brings a group of people together. Last year I was able to walk into any pub and say, it's coming home, and there would be a group of people who were there to talk to me about football. I met so many people because of last year's World Cup, and I have quite a lot of French friends and Italian friends, and especially my French friends who I know through badminton. They got so happy about the World Cup, and watching the final with them was a joy. Just had my friend Mitch. He said football sucks. And the reason he said that is because apparently Formula 1 is better, and that is the we call Mitch out on next week's episode of the podcast. That is a very interesting thing to say, Mitch. Thank you very much. But it just goes to show that everyone else has their own sport to love and follow. And Richard also double teamed with Mitch here and said that the World Cup is fun to watch, but anything else that's football related is boring. Formula 1, now that's fun. Again, two people massively in love with Formula 1. The World Cup can be fun, and I think why the World Cup is so accessible is because of how quick it is. It's not something played over a whole season, it's 2 months, and it's the ultimate peak of sporting ability. It's the best of the best, and some underdogs as well, so you get the underdog element as well. It really contains a bit of everything. It's national pride, it's underdogs, it's the best of the best, and it's short, and I think that's what makes it so accessible for people. Shami, she messaged in. Shami, we talked about meditation with her last week. Amazing guest. Definitely getting Shami back on the show, but she just says playing. It's not always about watching it for some people. I played football for 4 years. Loved it. And then Stephen, he messaged in to say, the beautiful game. It's sociable for all ages and backgrounds, brings communities together, passion, drama, rivalry, great comebacks, classic commentary, and transfer madness. Commentary is something I haven't touched on. I'm going to insert one of my favourite bits of commentary here from a game between Leicester and Watford where, if Leicester were in a perfect position. They basically had already won the game. They had a penalty. If they scored it, great. If they didn't, they still won the game. Watford were basically down and buried. It was in a playoff semi-final. And this commentary is just electric. It rings in my ears. And I 100% recommend you watching this. But here is one of my favourite pieces of commentary.
Who won it, scores it. Leicester City go to Wembley, and it's the end for Watford. Knockout takes, Almunia saves, knockout follows in, Almunia saves again. Absolutely astonishing. Now here come Watford. Forestieri. Here's Hogg! Deeney! Do not scratch your eyes! You are really seeing the most extraordinary finish here! It almost mirrors the final day! With the very last kick of this playoff semi-final, Troy Deeney wins it for Watford and sends them to Wembley!
And I think it's pretty clear to see why I love that piece of commentary so much. But that actually does conclude this week's episode of the My Generation podcast. Apologies, this is a slightly shorter one. I want to vary up the length to see what people enjoy. Some longer ones, some shorter ones, ones with clips, ones with comments, ones with guests, just to see what you like. But hopefully I've been able to convince you why I enjoy football. Maybe you've got the same sort of story for a sport you like. If you do, leave it in the comments, message the Facebook page in the description at the My Generation podcast, because we might be able to get you on the show to talk about your sport. Or if you just want to leave a comment, I'll feature it in one of the up-and-coming podcast episodes coming very, very soon down the pipeline. Thank you all very much for listening to another solo episode, just me and you talking here today about football. Hope you enjoyed it. And I will hear from you again very shortly next week, where we talk to returning guest Daniel Inwood about life-changing moments. Already recorded that episode, and it's coming out next Thursday. It is so much fun. It is just a really, really fun episode. We aren't too serious. It's very loose, very raw podcast episode that you're going to hear next week. Do tune in by subscribing so you never, ever miss a podcast episode every single Thursday at 6 o'clock. Turn on post notifications again so you don't miss all of the great new stuff we have coming up over the next few weeks. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next week on the My Generation podcast.